You want to support Roland Martin Unfiltered? Be sure to join our Bring the Funk fan club. Every dollar that you give to us supports our daily digital show. There's only one daily digital show out here that keeps it black and keep it real as Roland Martin Unfiltered. Support the Roland Martin Unfiltered daily digital show by going to RolandMartinUnfiltered.com. You can make this possible. All right, folks, in Mississippi, prison inmates have taken to social media pleading for help. In the last week, 5 inmates have died during riots that inmates say were started by the prison guards who themselves are gang members. They were also able to get this video out showing the deplorable conditions at one prison called Parchman Prison.
Man, them folks took us out of 29, man. MSP 29, man. Put us in 32. Condemned. This motherfucker been condemned 10 years, man. Look at the flow, man. And they just up and put us in here, man. Look at the flow. All the water in the flow, man. You trying to flood out. Look at the mildew everywhere, man, on the things. Ain't no running water. Mildew everywhere. Paint coming out the wall, bro. Mildew everywhere. Black mold, man. That's black mold. You can't even breathe that shit in, man. Look at the paint, bro. Look at this shit. This shit condemned, bro. We ain't got no running water. We ain't ate. And we ain't ate in 10 hours, man.
We ain't ate nothing. Our water ain't working.
Get cold as a motherfucker in here, man. Look at all that black mold, man.
Ain't nobody got no mask.
Ain't nobody got no mask. No mask, bro. We sleeping on straight concrete, man. No mask. Look at these guys. No mask, no power. No power, none of that. Water everywhere, man. Ice. Water everywhere. No running water, man. No running water, period.
Spiders out on the sun. Look how old this shit is. Look
no mat, man.
We ain't got to see them niggas straight
concrete, man.
They took all our food, no hygiene.
We ain't got no hygiene, no toothbrush, no running water. None of that. Look at the water on the floor, man.
Ain't nobody here got
you on Wi-Fi?
We recording this shit so these folks.
Look at all the water on the floor, man.
We ain't got no phone to call out to nobody.
We can't get on the wild phone. Look at the mold on here, man. I'm going to shower.
Man, I need to be over there. Yeah.
Shower ain't got no water, man. We ain't took no showers since we been here.
Man, show out here.
No running water, man. Hey, send them call y'all face. Bro, look at mildew everywhere, man. Who in the town, what they doing?
Brittany Thompson, he is of course, the only African American in Congress from Mississippi, sent this tweet out on yesterday. Go to my iPad, Henry. Tomorrow, I will be requesting that the U.S. Attorney General launch an investigation into the ongoing failures in safety, security, health, and environmental standards within the Mississippi Department of Corrections. This is unacceptable. Now, Mississippi's correctional system is on statewide lockdown as staff attempt to regain control of the prisons. Joining me right now to talk about what's happening in Mississippi is Mysonne. He, of course, New York General, a civil rights activist. Rukia Lumumba, Executive Director of the People's Advocacy Institute. And Amanda Hamilton, she is Director of Mississippi Dreams Prison Family Support, who also has a son incarcerated in Central Mississippi Correctional Facility. First off, I want to start with you, Amanda. What has your son told you about what is happening in the prison where he is being housed?
Well, he is at, as you said, Central Mississippi Correctional Facility. So he is in a work zone. He works in the kitchen and feeds the inmates. So there's a lot of inmates locked down that have been brought to Central Mississippi Correctional Facility from other areas, specifically the high-ranking gang members and some of the stabbed and injured victims are there with him. He says that now his pod went from 25, and I believe there's 4 different pods in his zone, and they're all packed now with 40 inmates to each area.
Obviously, for the family members, they have to be concerned when you hear that 5 inmates have died in the past week. When you see that video, certainly that has to be shocking to you, or is it no shock? Is this what Mississippi prisons are often like?
No shock here. It's been ready to implode for a while now. We've done several rallies. We've cried out for years, and no one was listening, but they are now. And I also would like to talk about that video. Those guys are walking around in lockdown. How are they walking around? Guards are letting them. They're allowing them to walk around. They shouldn't be walking around. And we in Mississippi are going to reject the narrative that it's the gang's problem.
Rukia, I want to go to you. Your sense of what is happening in these prisons. Does the state even care about these prisons? Is this a war between inmates and prison guards?
Yeah, so one, thank you for having us on today. I really appreciate Amanda jumping on to talk about her personal experience. Absolutely, Amanda is correct and has personal experience and can attest to that the conditions, the horrific conditions that people are living in behind these cages in these Mississippi prisons are the root cause of the violence that we're seeing now. It is the direct nexus between the two. Mississippi Department of Correction has for years been made aware through advocacy, through litigation held by the Southern Poverty Law Center and others, and through direct action, protests, and different things like that, of the horrific conditions inside of facilities, including the lack of medical treatment for people when they are injured, oftentimes requiring people incarcerated themselves to take care of the sick and the infirmed or the harmed, the hurt. And so at some point, when you treat people like they're nothing or below even an animal and put them in conditions that are inhumane, at some point a person is going to break. I mean, that's just the bottom line. And they're going to try to create an opportunity to fix the situation for themselves. And so when we see gang violence happening in here, it's a direct result of the inhumanity that is reflected upon how they're treated in the facilities. And the state knows about it. Really quickly, to answer that part of your question, the state knows about the dangers that these horrific conditions have caused, about the violence that it has caused. But let's be real. Prisons are cash cows. And the more people they're able to house in the prisons, the more money that is able to be made. Mississippi has private prisons as well as public prisons. Right now, Mississippi incarcerates over 19,000 people as of November 2019.
Mysonne, I want to go to you. Tamika Mallory and others have been investigating this issue, talking about it. T.I. and others have been retweeting this video, gathering more information. What is your understanding of what's going on, and what do you want folks watching to do?
Yeah, thank you, Roland. When I was woken up by my sleep by a plethora of DMs with these pictures and these videos, and being formerly incarcerated, understanding the dynamics that go on inside of prisons, and understanding that what's going on in Mississippi is not new. If you remember, we had a similar situation in Brooklyn in the MDC prison where we had to protest just so they can get basic heat and just a basic right. So when you look at this situation, it immediately reminded us of how the system, the prison system itself is designed to just treat us like animals. When you listen to what the governor said today and how he just kept referring to the gang violence and the inmates are the problem. And then you look at where these people live, and then you ask yourself, how do you ask human beings to live in these conditions and not have some level of uprising? So we're prepared to go to Mississippi to uplift the people on the ground, like Rukia, like the other lady, I forgot her name, but we want to come there to support them. We want to lend our services. We want to lend our platform. We want to help upraise the voice of the people who've been on the ground fighting for this. These people have been doing these things, and it's unfortunate that we have to look and see men dead, see men stabbed to death, see men living in conditions that animals wouldn't even live in, for people to start to pay attention. And then when you listen to the governor, it doesn't sound like he's paying attention to dynamics of the prison that he's in charge of, it sounds like he's focusing on the inmates and the prisoners who are engulfed and encaged in this rat-infested hell. So if we don't start to focus on the problem and see where these people live and see how that, contributes to the violence, that contributes to the anger. When you surround someone with trash and mildew and things that make them feel worthless, then that's when you start to get that type of reaction. So we're prepared to go down there and stand with these people and demand that justice be held, demand that investigations be held, and demand that somebody be held accountable.
What about that, Amanda? Do you think part of the problem is that, let's just be honest, Americans have an attitude of, the hell with these people. They're animals. We don't care about them. Look, toss them in jail, throw the key away. That literally is part of the psychosis of many Americans when it comes to folks who are in prisons.
Absolutely. Lock them up and forget about them. They don't have to look at it. So, what I've been trying to do for over a year now is open people's eyes. And how do you get people to open their eyes? By changing their hearts and minds. And unfortunately, looking at these photos that have been released recently, you can't look away because they're everywhere on everybody's timeline, whether they know someone incarcerated or not. And I would like to speak on what our leaving governor said today. He mentioned, that it is a gang problem and that it's a funding problem, but Mississippi has the third highest incarceration rate in the world. United States being, number one. And so Mississippi falls 3 inside the United States. This is not a funding issue. This is a too many people are locked up issue. You have a third of the people in our prison system are there on nonviolent drug crimes.
And in fact, Rukia, what's interesting is I remember a year or so ago that you had private prisons in Mississippi that were complaining about efforts to address mass incarceration by not placing folks in these jails. It was interesting because they were literally saying, well, how are we going to survive? I mean, I remember that story vividly, and I'm going, what the hell?
Exactly. The question should not be about how a prison is going to survive. I mean, that should be the goal, is to have a prison shut down. When you should be proud that you don't have many people coming in your doors anymore, because that means that something right is happening, that people are no longer committing acts of violence that cause or funnel this system of mass incarceration, right? Like, our goal should not be to increase prison population, it should be to decrease it. And I mean, that is one of the outcomes that we want to see adopted from our push to really increase humane treatment of people who are currently in prison, is that we want to actually see the prison population decrease significantly in Mississippi. We want to see this institution of parchment that has been around since the early 1800s, which first was a plantation, an 18,000 acre plantation turned into an 18,000 acre facility of incarceration, right? We want to see that shut down. It's been around for too long. It represents oppression. It represents a pain in our history. It represents horrific traumatic treatment of people and continues to do the same today. And so we want to see that shut down. We want, in the immediate, we want to see people who are injured inside of the prisons right now. We're getting reports on the inside where people are saying they're not treating people who need immediate medical attention. So we want that medical attention to come to those people immediately. We want to improve conditions inside the facility where people are not living in filth. We want to ensure that people are being treated with respect and dignity. And so we want to make sure that the right people are hired, the right people are trained. We want to see more resources come in. We want more social workers. We want more counselors. We want better food. There is so much that needs to happen, and there is no reason why it can't happen.
Mysonne, final question for you. Do you, you saw what I read Congressman Brittany Thompson wants the U.S. Attorney to do. Look, at the end of the day, these are still human beings. These are people who we supposedly want to one day be released and come back into society. To your point, treating them this way does not make that conducive. In fact, it makes it more difficult.
That's right.
Well,
The
it makes it
recidivism rate climbs.
almost impossible.
Sorry.
You know, when we look at this situation, man, it's a microcosm of what's going on in America's prisons, because this is common. Every day you hear about it. I get DMs being formerly incarcerated, advocating for incarcerated individuals. I'm overwhelmed with this type of emails and these type of pictures and these type of stories, and I can't even help all of them because it's so much. But what we do know is that these are human beings. And when we look at our justice system, our injustice system, and how every day someone's coming home after 20 and 30 years for crimes that they never committed and being exonerated, it shows you that these are still human beings, that everyone in there deserves the opportunity to be able to rehabitat this society and not go through this type of inhumane treatment. So we have to understand that. We have to look at it as these are our brothers and our sisters and our family members, and identify with the fact that most of them are trying to come back to society and will come back to society. And they're going to be products of whatever we feed them. So this prison system is trying to destroy our culture, is destroying our young men, is destroying the mind states. And when you hear how the governor, because it comes from the top down, and you hear how he speaks about these individuals, you understand why the prisons are like they are in Mississippi. And we're going to demand, like you said, we're going to demand that something happen.
Amanda, you want to make a final comment? Go ahead.
I would just like to say that, one of the suggestions that I have for immediate, and Session can go in next week. They can go in tomorrow or Wednesday and do an emergency, session for this particular problem and a crisis that we're having. Oklahoma just had the largest commutation ever recorded in history. Almost 500 people were commutated because they took drug possession down to misdemeanors instead of felonies. I mean, that would save us a lot of space and give more food and more things, to the other prisoners that are there. It's just one of the suggestions that I have. We're exhausted down here. We're exhausted.
Well, first of all, it only makes common sense, and unfortunately, you don't have too much sense that's common there in Mississippi, because you still have this attitude. And again, for me, it's not a question of picking on Mississippi or Alabama, but it's a state of mind where if you look at, when slavery ended, the peonage system was put in place. And so what you have here, you have this view, these people who are in these prisons, who are largely African-American, they are, in a sense, free labor. And folks can treat them that way. So we certainly appreciate all of your activism in this. Amanda Hamilton, thank you so very much. Rukia Lumumba, thank you very much as well as Mysonne. Keep up the good work.
Can I just add something about the women?
Yeah, go ahead.
The women are also suffering inside of their correctional facilities and in their units. And so I think we always have to remember to talk about them. And then lastly, we still need to restore the right to vote in Mississippi. Mississippi increased the number of felonies to 23 that prevent a person coming home from prison from ever voting again in their life. So I just want to thank you again, Roland, for taking the time to talk about this.
All right, thanks.
Really appreciate it.
Thanks so much. We appreciate it.
Thank you, Roland.
I want to introduce my panel right now. Robert Patillo, civil rights attorney, also Dr. Avis Jones-DeWeaver, political analyst, and Derek Holly, president of Reaching America and political analyst. I'm going to start with you, Robert. The last point Rukia made there, Mississippi increasing number of felonies, people can't get a right to vote. I mean, there's a reason why this state is so backwards. There's a reason why, when you look at economically what the fundamental problem is this. You're spending all of this money, you're treating folks this way. What the hell you think people are how they're going to respond?
Well, this has been going on for a long time. Curtis Mayfield, Spare This Country, Mississippi's Fate. Nina Simone, Mississippi Goddamn. Let's understand the fact that when you go to prison, when you're in state custody, it's exactly that, custody. You still have an Eighth Amendment right against cruel and unusual punishment. I would think black mold, no health care, lack of sanitation will violate the Eighth Amendment. Also, we have to address the fact that you still have a First Amendment right to free speech and free communication within certain bounds. So let's understand that these inmates did not have access to cell phones and not access to videotape, video and camera, we would not know about this. So we have to start pushing for the democratization of information and of technology so that people will be able to comment on, exercise their First Amendment constitutional rights to expose things such as this. Not to mention the fact that we talked about the felony disenfranchisement point of it. It's completely unconstitutional. 15th Amendment lays out in one paragraph that you can remove someone's right to vote because of participation in previous rebellion and the crimes associated with that. States have expanded that for felony disenfranchisement. What it was meant to do was stop former Confederates from voting after the rebellion, and we're using it to stop black and brown people from voting today. And it weighs on our constitutional system when you take away someone's vote, their franchise, when you take away their freedom of speech, their First Amendment rights, then there's no way to enforce the Eighth Amendment because they have no access to bring these issues to light. And thank God that some people have access to cell phones so we know about these things. But look, Epstein didn't kill himself. That's what all of us think and believe. But it's because of the failings of our criminal justice system that something like that can happen, and something like that in Mississippi can happen, because we have no ability to interact with these individuals, and we have to make it a priority not to forget about our brothers and sisters who are in state custody. They are still human beings and have all the rights under the Constitution.
Avis, I grew up in Texas, and there's a name that is etched into my memory, William Wayne Justice. It's crazy that, again, growing up, and so you're like, okay, why did I know the name William Wayne Justice? William Wayne Justice was a federal judge. This is from the obit when he died in 2009 from the New York Times. Here we go to my iPad. The state defended a prison system with 2 doctors for every 17,000 prisoners, where 2,000 inmates slept on the floor, and where inmate trustees, known as building tenders, essentially ran the cell blocks through coercion. It continued that Texas had, in effect, the best penal system in the nation. In 1980, after a trial that lasted nearly a year, Judge Justice ordered major changes in the state's prison system. In 1987, he held the state in contempt because the promised progress had been so meager. In 2002, after Texas had spent hundreds of millions of dollars to build and improve prisons, Judge Justice released the Texas penal system from federal oversight. That's a 22-year period.
Yeah.
That's why I remember the name, because every time the news came on, it was all federal judge William Wayne Justice, who they call an activist judge.
Right.
But again, I would hope that in Mississippi, there would be a similar lawsuit against the state to compel them. But this is also why who sits on the federal bench matters.
Oh, my God.
Because if it wasn't for a William Wayne Justice, had he been a right-wing ideologue, that wouldn't have happened. But people calling him activist judge, he was like, yes, I'm actively defending the Constitution, to Robert's point.
Absolutely. And it's just disgusting when you see these inhumane conditions that human beings are forced to live within. And it's because you have a culture that says that these are throwaway people, that says that they don't matter, that says that we can do anything to them that we want to do and we will not have to answer to anybody, including kill them or have them die under mysterious circumstances and never tell the truth about what happened to them. This is injustice of the highest order, and it requires some outside entity to force some right doing here. But unfortunately, I don't think the Attorney General of this United States right now is the person to do that, because he's more likely to side with the Mississippians than he is to side with the people who are having their human rights abused.
I gotta agree with her on that one, Derek.
And I would just say, I'm glad that you did this story, because as everyone has talked about how we look at the prisoners as people, just throwaway people, that they are less than human beings. And so, but you look at these people right here, it's almost as if they're in a third world prison. And one of my neighbors—
They are.
Yeah, one of my neighbors actually got locked up abroad. And the things that he described are exactly what's going on in Mississippi. The other thing is, I'm glad that you did this story, because I saw the story about the 2 prisoners who escaped from Mississippi, and I'm like, oh God, 2 guys escaped. But I didn't realize one of them was from this prison right here, and one of them is being held for 40 years for aggravated assault. You got people who commit murder and only get 20 years. This brother's been locked up for 40 years for aggravated assault. So a lot of these people, the crimes don't even fit the time that they're doing right now.
Well, because it's because this is a state that is still a racist state.
Agreed.
That still operates as if this is the early 1800s. And these folks do not care. They still worship Confederates. They still, frankly, Mississippi would have no problem if slavery came back.
Absolutely not.
This is it. So there is no effort by, let's be honest, Republicans in this state to deal with the problems in this state, to continue to put folks in prison. To hear her say Mississippi is number 3 in the world. Think about that.
Wow.
If the U.S. is, when you look at the number of people, if you look at the number of people who are the population of that state, and the number of folks they put in prison, you're like, what in the hell are y'all doing? Because their mentality is any small thing, gone.
It's also about providing jobs. It's actually about Black bodies being a means of production in that state.
Oh, they are all about the 13th Amendment.
Absolutely.
Where it says slavery does no longer exist except when it comes to the prison system. Robert, you wanted to go jump in?
Well, also, I would say I wouldn't just condense it to Mississippi. You can find very similar with the National Association of Criminal Defense Lawyers. We did a survey of jail conditions in the South. You can find similar prisons in Alabama and Florida and West Virginia and Kentucky. It is an American problem that we have with the way that we prosecute crimes and the way that we see constitutional rights once you're incarcerated.
But the reason I'm specifically talking about Mississippi is because I'm looking at this thing beyond just the prisons. I'm looking at a state of mind. I'm looking at a culture. When you hear Rukia Lumumba say they increase the number of felonies that will keep you from having your right to vote. When you look at all of those different things, these are individuals who are in the legislature, in the governor's mansion, who are trying to sit here and like, how many more ways can we sit here and keep folks from voting? How many more ways can we keep driving profit by throwing folks in prisons? That's what's happening here. And the crazy part is, you're a broke-ass state. Okay?
Yes.
Part of your problem is you're broke because of nonsense like this here. You got folks who are actually able-bodied, who could be working, but you're spending thousands locking them up in prison.
But I think a big thing that we have to look at is the fact that this can be corrected through federal action. That throughout the 18th century, throughout the 19th century. But let's understand. It was always,
federal government?
It was always the feds.
Not this one. Right, but that's exactly, though, what Republicans have never liked.
Yeah.
Is that very issue right there. That's why it amazes me when you have these conversations, again, with the people like Dinesh D'Souza and these other conservatives who have no understanding of history. There's a reason why African Americans look to the federal government. Because the U.S. Constitution, for all the ways it's flawed, was at least a much better, provided much more relief than these state constitutions. And that's the problem. That's the problem here. And the fact that you haven't had Mississippi state leaders saying, what the hell is going on? The governor should be calling the head of prisons in and saying, what in the hell kind of operation are you running? And instead, it's kind of like, what's wrong with y'all? What's wrong with y'all?
Hopefully, since this video came out, Roland, that some of this...
They don't give a damn. They don't give a damn.
It shouldn't take a video. We had, 25, 30 people running around for the Democratic nomination for president this year, depended on 95% of the African American vote. And they spend more time talking about refugees when we have people living like refugees in American prisons, and they're not bringing it up. This hasn't been one debate question during any of the Democratic debates for the last 10 months.
First of all, let's just be clear. In the last debate, we finally got the first question when it came to the federal judiciary. Okay, so it ain't like in the last debate, you finally got the first question on voter suppression in 30 some odd debates. Poverty don't even come up. Plus, you got to remember, in these debates, the issue is not what didn't come up in the debate. The issue is what didn't they ask. That's the real issue. What didn't they ask? All right, folks, back to our Roland Martin Unfiltered video in just one moment. All right, y'all, as the marijuana momentum continues, the folks at 420 marijuana.org have already reached more than half of their funding goal for the hemp CBD crowdfunding campaign. That's right. If you want to take advantage, you better do so real quick because it's not going to last much longer. I'm talking about the hemp plant, the good cousin of marijuana, with a much higher concentration of CBD. That means hemp gives you all the medical benefits of marijuana without getting you high. Robert says thank you very much. Also, hemp farming is now legal in the U.S., creating one of the largest commodities worldwide. It's an investment opportunity for you. And the folks at 420 Real Estate, this is what their business model is. They buy land that supports hemp CBD grow operations and lease it to licensed high-paying tenants. They are hemp CBD landlords. If you want to participate, you can do so for as little as $200 up to $10,000. Again, $200 up to $10,000. All you got to do is go to marijuanastock.org. That's marijuanastock.org. You can get in the game and get in the game now. Now back to your Roland Martin Unfiltered video.